Hello. I just wanted to stop you for 1 minute just while I answer the question that was set by Eric Green in the last podcast. Eric asked me, what does better leadership look like? And obviously this is very subjective and very unique to each individual. But I think the essence is that there is no end to leadership on developing as a leader. As leaders, we are constantly learning, adapting, changing, and trying out new things. And that's sort of the essence of leadership, is continuing constant development and trying to become a better leader constantly. There is no end to it. So that's sort of what I believe in terms of what is better leadership. So I'll let you enjoy this week's podcast. Today, we're joined by Patricia Haywood, and we're talking about women in construction and the importance around self-awareness. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the 16th episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I'm joined by the absolute fantastic Patricia Haywood. Patricia is the founder of Master BuildHers. So Patricia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this podcast today. So Patricia, I want to start off really sort of by understanding your sort of background and how you got into construction, because it's a very sort of interesting story. I'm sure absolutely everybody would love to hear it. So can you just give me a sort of brief background behind yourself?
Well, so I actually trained as a barrister. I practice as a lawyer, but I've been working for a long time. I've been working since I was probably around 13. I've just always been working and paying my way. But growing up, so I grew up in Jamaica, that's where I'm from. And my family always had like an interest in construction, doing just small scale, like road surfacing. So from that standpoint, I was exposed to the sector and, doing work and stuff like that. I had family members who did the hard graft work. And then I moved on to doing law. I don't know if you want to hear that story.
Yeah, go for
it. So
I
actually, I did law. I was trying to figure out what next to do. I was in school, and I grew up actually in a very garrison community. So I'm not from a wealthy family, but I knew that I wanted to just elevate my lifestyle and do something, be more, do more. And I was at school, we had Careers Day, a lawyer came. I think it was the first time we had Careers Day. They were trying something new. And this lawyer came and he spoke to us, about he was well-dressed and stuff. And I was like, well-dressed, seems like he makes good money, speaks nice. I think this is the thing I'm going to do. This was my route out, And so after he spoke, I ran him down. I spoke to him. I asked him, like, what do I have to do to be a lawyer? Because I didn't know. I didn't really have professionals in my family. We're all basically blue collar workers and stuff. So he took out a paper. He asked me, like, what am I doing? What are my courses, my grades? And he just basically gave me like the guide to life. And from there, I just started doing what he said. Trying to get those grades, and then I went into law, and that's how I did law. I practiced for a little bit, and then I actually worked in the British Virgin Islands. And from there, I coming from a small island, you realize at some point that the world is bigger than your little globe or your little bubble. And so I always wanted to see more of the world. So I came to Dundee. I did a master's in France. And then came the financial crisis. It was the height of it. I don't think I fully understood what was going to happen. And no one was hiring, at least not for a lawyer at my level. And so I started my first business then. And I did international trade and development, doing like non-tariff barriers to trade. So looking at like roads, how construction can help economies, what are the infrastructures you need for trade, that type of thing. So that is how I then got thrown back into like the construction, but from a different standpoint. But even when I was doing law, I was doing like project financing, that type of thing. But then I got thrown back in like the on-site, in-country work, doing that, and I grew that business really well. That business took me around different countries, living in different countries. And then from there, when I moved to Jakarta, I started doing more like oil and gas infrastructure, renewables, and helping to advise on some of those projects. And then when I came back to the UK, I moved back into renewables and infrastructure. So it was just a journey, and that's how I really came full circle back into working in construction, having just a lot of transferable skills that I could bring over. But by this time, I'd started other companies, multiple companies, even when I lived in Jakarta. I also lived in Singapore. I did, for example, they're very big on teak and rattan. So I started doing that. I would travel around the country finding suppliers who would build furniture for me and stuff like that. I would export it to like the West, or there was a huge expat community. So they would commission through me, because quality control is a huge issue. And then, having someone who speaks English as a first language, and then I was like the middle person for them. So they commission, and so I would do some of that. So I was always having just this entrepreneurial spirit. And so I brought a lot of skill sets into working in construction, working mainly on infrastructure, large engineering projects. So that's how I started doing that. It wasn't a straight line, and it wasn't like a plan. I just went one foot in front of the other. Opportunities came and I took them. Yeah.
I mean, this has to be absolutely one of the most fascinating sort of life stories I kind of ever heard of. I mean, the amount of organisations you worked in, the sort of things you've done, the places you've worked, it's just I didn't think it was possible even, to work in so many places. I think it's just absolutely amazing, really. And so in terms of the construction that you talked about in the United Kingdom, is there any projects you've been working on that we may have heard of?
Yes, I've worked on a couple of projects. I've worked when I worked in offshore renewables, I worked on the major projects, mostly German-funded projects. And then in infrastructure, civil engineering, I've worked on like Crossrail, for example, and big projects like that. Extension of like the tube lines and stuff like that I've worked on. So, and those projects tend to take many years. So that's what I've been doing, but I'm more in the commercial side of things. Yeah. So I lead the commercial looking at just the value for money, every pound spent, how do we get that value? Especially because the projects that we work on are partly taxpayer funded. So it's ensuring that the taxpayer gets value for every pound spent on those projects. So and then I moved more into project program management, because I've just always had that interest. And I've also worked in like project program management before, when I was even doing like international trade and development and non-tariff barriers to trade. Is really coming in and helping capacity development and project managing like the studies and stuff like that. And so bringing all those skills back over. And I mean, the reason why I came back to the UK is because I was living in country and married, and we wanted to have a child, and we just wanted to come back to a base somewhere. And so after a while, it's fun. But after a while, you're like, okay, let's pack up the suitcase now. Okay, let's put down some roots. Okay, and because it's a transient lifestyle, and it's hard to like maintain friendships, see family, just do the things that we take for granted daily. It becomes a lot harder. Yeah.
No, I say it's extremely sort of fascinating, and sort of. I think it's good to sort of see. I mean, I don't think there is a typical route into construction. Mine was completely by accident, as most people's sort of routes is sort of by accident. They get into construction. I do sort of believe that most people that get into it really enjoy it and really love it and can't imagine themselves in any other industry. And I think that's one of the unique things about construction. And I think it's great to sort of see that the different roles in construction. It's not person with a shovel in a trench digging holes and things like that. There's the commercial side, the project management side, the design side, the architectural side. There's huge amounts of different roles within the construction industry, the logistics. There's all sorts of different roles, and I think it's important that everybody, especially sort of the younger generation, see that there are different roles, and perhaps we can have a new generation of people who purposefully want to get into construction industry in a specific role and sort of really aim for that. That would be the great thing. And so as you're sort of growing up, you talked about you had careers day at school, and that's what sort of got you into wanting to be a lawyer. As you were sort of growing up, as you were sort of going through university and growing your craft as a lawyer, did you have any sort of role models, particularly female role models that you could look up to and aspire to be like?
Not a lot, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard finding a lot of female role models who were at a level that you could aspire to. So, for example, one of the firms that I worked in, first firms that I worked, you didn't have a lot of female partners, for example. You had female senior associates, but that's about it. And there was a female associate who kind of took me under her wings, and she helped me a lot to like build my self confidence, because I had met a senior associate, a female in that firm, who tore me down. Yes. And working with her was a nightmare, and then I fought my way to leave that department, and then I met another female senior associate, and she was just a lot more empathetic and caring, and she kind of took me under her wings, and she helped me along, because I was fresh out of law school, right? So I would say in real life, that was like the mentor that I had. But I think because I always, as I said before, I didn't have a lot of like professionals in my family. Well, I had no professionals in my family. I don't necessarily had a lot of good examples, role models, like you can be all things, do all things. So from that age, I quickly learned to look outside of the real world for examples. So, for example, I have a circle of influence, and these are people I probably do. I have no idea. We've never met. They're probably even dead. But I would always like read about them and find people out who are not necessarily people that I can touch and see and speak to, and look at them and see what I like about them, values, morals, and behaviors, habits, and try to emulate that. So that's one of the things that I do to fill that gap, because oftentimes, especially in the path that I've taken, is not a path that a lot of people take. And so I found it hard to see other females, especially at high levels, that I could look to, or for example, in my little circle of like friends from like law school and stuff, I was the only one who was taking this risk. A lot of people looked at me like, oh, what is she doing? Because the path is to graduate law school, you go to a firm, you work your way up to partnership, and you sit there and you collect your equity and you live a grand life. I didn't do that. I was off doing random stuff that people couldn't understand, like even my family couldn't understand. So you studied all this time to be a lawyer, and you're going off to live. They just can't understand what you're doing. And that's because there's a lack of representation also. Because even that traveling lifestyle, working in country, most of the consultants are men. Now it makes sense, because traditionally men were the ones who could go out and about, leave their families and go there, like, you know. But I fill that gap by just finding people, and I still have this circle that I tap into these people who some of them might be dead, and I read about them, I watch their videos even on YouTube, I listen to what they have to say, and I pull things from all of them and try to emulate them in my life. Yeah.
Is there any one person in particular that you'd sort of say you get most value out? I'm sure there's lots of people either listening or watching that would be interested to sort of understand.
So one person that I really love is Napoleon Hill, and I watch a lot of his videos. I also like Marcus Garvey. I watch his videos. So those are two other people. I love Michelle Obama. We are best friends in my head. I'm like, you know, because she's a lawyer too. You know, she's a Black woman, and she has really ascended to a level that, you know, for a lot of women, we look up to her. You know, so I'm friends with her in my head. Yeah.
Brilliant. So this, I suppose, you know, as you got to come into the construction industry, did you see that change? Did you see more sort of female leaders or people that you can sort of mentor you? Or did you sort of become the mentee, you know, sort of?
Yeah, I know what happened is that when I moved into construction, I became the mentor for a lot of, especially women, and even for younger men too. And a part of it, I think, is because after you get to know my journey, that didn't just come from like engineering backgrounds, people get interested, you know, and you've done this, you've done that, and I think also, you know, coming from just like my circle of influence thing and pulling those habits, I try to emulate them in my daily life. So I somehow became the mentor. In construction, there are not a lot of women, especially in the pyramid, high up the pyramid. There are not a lot of women, and so the representation is not necessarily there. And then so it was hard, or it still is hard as a woman to find another woman at a level where be like, oh, and especially a woman who is at that level who then looks down to help you for various reasons, right? That they don't necessarily, you know, one of the things that we say now is to, you know, turn around and pull the other one up. We don't necessarily initially had that culture. So yeah, I somehow became the mentor for quite a few women, you know, especially women who were stuck in their careers for years upon years. And I think also is because I bring that outside view, because I still consider myself, well, I don't even have to, the industry still sees me as an outsider. And, you know, that's how construction is. Construction tends to be very closed. And even, you know, someone who is from not, because I studied law, for example, I didn't do a STEM. I did STEM in high school, you know, but I met that lawyer who showed me the way. You know, so because of that, it has been my experience that in construction, if you're not necessarily from a hard STEM background, you're seen as not, you don't really see that person as someone who can add a lot of value, which is the wrong impression. That's the wrong assumption.
Absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, because I don't use my STEM knowledge on a day-to-day basis now.
Yeah. So
it got to me where I am now, but I don't use it now. So yeah, I think that's ridiculous.
So we bring a lot of transferable skills and experience in that outside view. And I think that's what I bring, is that outside view, because you know, I've seen construction in so many different countries. I've seen practices. I work in so many different sectors that I can pull lessons and bring them in. And I think that's what, like, the women who would come to me, that's what they saw. So here is this woman who hasn't, you know, come from a straight path into construction, and here she is, you know. So I would help them from everything from CV to interviews to how to negotiate the salary. I'm big on that. We don't leave money on the table.
We might need to talk.
Yeah, so that's what I was helping women with when I moved into,
Yeah.
and I was also challenging. I was doing a lot of challenging because there was one organization I worked in where I was considered too much girl. Yes. And so I've always been standing up and speaking out. Um, yeah.
That's good. That's great. So what would you say? I mean, you don't have to give any specifics, but what's been sort of one more challenging aspects of being a woman in construction?
Oh, wow. There's so many challenges.
Mm.
One is just the fact that construction is still such a gendered sector with very little movement in the direction of gender equality or equity, even on any level. And research has shown that at our current pace, it's going to take about 200 years before we see any real change, the change that we so desperately need in the industry. And what that does is that it's created a sector of old boys, and it's created a sector that is filled with people who look, speak, walk like each other. And that has stifled innovation. And so what you have is women, a lot of women are lower down the pyramid. The lower down the pyramid you go is where you find women, which is such a shame because women bring so much to the table, especially in construction. And I mean, my story might seem so unique, but it's not, because a lot of women come into construction um, through a different door. It's not straight like uni, like for example, engineering or some construction related degree and then into construction. How it is set up right now, a lot of women come in older, like I did. I didn't come in straight from uni, and they come in through a different path. What that means is that we're bringing a lot of transferable skills to the industry, an outside view, and I'm big on having an outside view, a different way of looking at things, insights that you don't get because you won't get if everybody's from the same background. And we all know that, for example, creative people think differently from technical people, lawyers think differently from accountants. It's a fact. I mean, research has been done on this. So imagine having a melting pot where everybody is given the same amount of opportunities, the same platform, the time to speak, the respect, the importance, what that will really do for the industry. So the challenges that women face is not just a challenge for women alone. And this is what we need to get. This is not just a woman's thing. This is an industry. It impacts everything. And even looking at the men in the industry, it impacts them too, because it means that let's say you are a man in construction and your wife works in construction. I mean, how would you feel knowing the issues that she goes through? It impacts you too. And we also in the industry, we have one of the highest suicide rates or industry. So it means that not only are these challenges affecting and depressing to women, but it is clear that the culture within our industry is also impacting the men. It is also impacting the men. So I believe that if we can really come together, and I guess this will come to at some point to, I don't know if you're going to make this point about like allies and what men can do, is having that high level of self-awareness. That's what we need. And it's based on that things are going to start changing. We have this thing about the levels of consciousness, for example, and then you have the levels of I guess like people who think they're good at something, but they're not necessarily good at it because they have a low level of self-awareness. It is only when you reach that you understand that there are unknowns. There are things that you just do not know, right? You just can't comprehend it at this because you're just not on that wavelength, you're not on that energy line at that point in time. And in my experience has been that as an industry, we are so below the line of mastery in terms of self-awareness, and that's why these issues continue to perpetuate and hinder us. I mean, everybody, we know that we're in the the business of making money for most construction companies. It's a bottom line thing. And so the case has been made for a long time now that it impacts the bottom line. So I think that now the discussion needs to move from that point and perhaps be had on a human level, as to then it becomes a moral issue. Is this the way we want to go into the next couple of years, having this type of inequality within our industry? Do we want to continue as an industry that lacks innovation? We are so far behind. We look at, for example, the motor industry, the motor car industry, we are so far behind. We have fully electric cars, we have driverless cars coming on board, and we're still laying bricks the same way. We saw it during COVID, for example, where supervisors couldn't get on site, yet still we have drones. We are just not innovating and utilizing the technology that is present, that can be transferred from other industries. And that is why it is so important to be open to women and to people from other backgrounds. And I say women because women tend to be older and coming through different pathways. We bring so much to the industry that it's underestimated. Because even I had this discussion even the couple weeks ago with the RICS. They were sending out fielders for responses on the process, and I was just like, even the way in which we. So, for example, if you want to be a lawyer in the UK, you can study really anything, and then you can do the like the LPC and stuff like that to qualify, and there is a pathway. Even to come into the industry and to be certified to do certain work in the industry, it is such a hassle as someone who's not from, let's say, a STEM background or so, in order to navigate that. So even just the way in which we set up getting certified, making that impact, getting stuck into things is such a hurdle for women. For example, apprenticeships. Apprenticeship system in the industry is geared towards younger people, but research shows that women tend to be older when they come into the industry for many reasons. They might take time out, they might start a career, for example. They might decide, okay, I'm going to have children, they take some time out, and then they decide, oh, I'm going to go into construction, I want to work with my hands, I want to do a trade, and it's hard to get an apprenticeship because you're older. So even something like that, if the numbers, and this is another thing, we need to start making decisions based on data, informed decisions. So if the data is showing us, and there are tons of research online about this, if the data is showing us that a lot of women come into the industry older, and I see this because I connect with a lot of women online, they contact me, right? They come into the industry older, then why is it that we're not creating as an environment or a space or accommodating them to make that transition? Because the fact is that the younger people, and we know this because we see that we are having a labor shortage in the industry. This is a fact. Yep. I mean, like even in the US, close to 50%, I think it's like 40 something percent of the construction industry are baby boomers, right? We're going to have, and in the UK, it's similar. We're going to have a huge gap to fill. And we know that a lot of these young people, so like we're going into schools, we're telling people, oh, come to the industry. These people aren't ready to work. They're not ready to work, right? So who are going to fill the gaps? It's going to be people from other industries, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we know that these young people are not coming right now, and we have a whole set of people on the sidelines who are holding their hands up and saying, I'll work, but we're not making any like opportunities available to them, then that's a huge issue.
That's really interesting because I can see it from the sort of mid-20s, early career sort of age, into 30s, where they feel pressurized to get as much done as soon as possible because, as you say, as the older you get, that's the opportunities become sort of less. They're trying to make the most of those opportunities while sort of younger. And as you say,
yes,
particularly for women and for any other sector, to come in sideways at another level, at a different age, there isn't that ability to do that as much. And one of the key things I think you're talking about there is about perspective, and huge amount requirement for getting different perspectives on how we design things, how we build things, innovation, how we build better societies. We need the perspectives of everybody, and we need to allow people to come into the industry from the side to feed into those perspectives as well. And self-awareness, that's hugely important as well. I do believe in that as well, exactly how you said it. So thank you for that. How does this sort of tie in with your Master BuildHers then? Can you tell me a bit more about why you started that? What was the drive for starting that, and what you sort of hope to achieve with Master BuildHers?
So I started Master BuildHers. I had the idea for Master BuildHers back in 2017. I was doing a master's actually, and in major program management. And my professor he had a slide deck and he was talking about the master builders. So at my university, the greats, the people who build on time, to budget, deliver the scope and the benefit, they're considered master builders. So he had this slide deck and there was only one woman there. There was only one woman in this deck. And I was just like, where are the other women? Even in my cohort, I think that was the first cohort with so many women, and probably about 10 of us or so who were in the cohort. And that was the most women in the history of the program, right? And I was just like, at that point, I decided I'm on a mission to find more of these women, because we are out here, right? But the fact, it comes back to the earlier point, the fact of the matter is that we don't get as many opportunities to really develop and to hone our skills and to ascend that level of mastery. And even when we ascend that level of mastery, we don't necessarily get that recognition and respect. So that's when I decided I was going to do Master BuildHers, because it was all about the master builders. And so that's how that came about. And I started Master BuildHers with the aim. My mission is clear. Within the UK, female entrepreneurship is not. It's not like the US. The US, they have a hotbed of women entrepreneurs. I think even in 2020 they had one of the most women startups. US. In the UK, our numbers are very low. For example, in construction, I think it's like 4.9% of the industry that is women owned, and that's so low. And especially in an industry where it's going to take us 200 years to see the change we want to see, especially in an industry where the innovation and just the level of acceptance and the culture is not where we want it to be. How are we going to really accelerate that? For me, it's by having more of a startup and run successful businesses. That's how I looked at it, because it doesn't matter what people say. With money comes power. With power, you get more seats at the table. With power, you get really to influence policies. You get to influence culture. And that's how I looked at it. So for me, I am about empowering women to start, grow, and scale their businesses. I am not about us waiting and begging for seats at tables anymore. We have been waiting for a very long time. It is not happening, and no one has 200 years to wait. We want to start accelerating that change by having more of us. The more of us start starting up businesses, the more of us start growing our businesses, we start throwing pebbles in the pond one at a time, and it becomes a ripple effect of change. And when more of us start talking, it's going to be like a chorus, and they will not be able to ignore us as women, because with money comes power. And the research show, even the RICS did some research the other day, and women, I think it was like 40 40 something into early 50s, they earn 20,000 pounds less than their male counterparts doing the same work. So the fact of the matter is that as you get older as a woman, you start earning less. As you get older as a man, they see it as, oh, you have a lot of experience. So we're going to pay you more. So our bargaining power is reducing as we get older, right? And so if we are going to sit around and wait for the industry to make the changes by itself, it's not going to happen, at least not in our lifetime right now. And so that's how Master BuildHers came about. It's about bringing women together to tap into their own mastery and the mastery of each other, and growing widely successful businesses, elevating their lifestyles, dominating their industries, and creating a culture of change. Because when you see one woman start up, Jane down the road, she's a plumber, she starts up, she's running her business is doing well, she can hire another woman. Let's say Jackie is a roofer. She sees Jane doing that. She's like, oh, I can do that too. Representation matters. And I see this, in the women who contact me. Like the other day, a woman contacted me. She said, you know what? I just realized that the man who he's doing the same work that I'm doing is making more than me. And she's like, I'm devastated because I make so much sacrifice. I make a lot of sacrifice to do this job. I have women who tell me, I had my child and I left my child, with the childminder, the nursery, to go back to work. That, do you know how it rips your heart out as a mother to leave your child with someone else to go back to work? And then you realize, and I'm not even making enough, and it's devastating. But how are we going to change the game? We're going to have to change the game by really just playing the game. And how capitalism works is that with money comes power. And right now, as a collective, we don't necessarily have that amount of power, because if only 4.9% of us are owning businesses within the sector, that's not enough share of the pie in order to make a huge enough impact. So that's what Master BuildHers is about. And that's how the name came about, actually.
That's great. To me, it sounds like trying to get as many sort of startups led by women in the construction sector. That's sort of an accurate summary?
Yes, that's about it. But you know what? There are women there. So I had a woman who spoke to me the other day, and there are women already in the sector who they want to work, for themselves, or they may have tried and they didn't succeed. But the success is not, or the failure of success is not a reflection of their abilities. It's just the fact that we don't have the same level of support, camaraderie, poured into us as, for example, research shows that a male, for example, could go into the bank and get a loan a lot easier than a woman can. Or even when you look at the angel investors, venture capitalists, they tend to go towards more male-owned companies, right? That's just the fact. So it's about, you do have these women, and she's like, they come, she's a woman in the industry too. She's a senior woman, and the women would contact her and say, oh, I'm looking for a job, and she's like, when she talks to them, and she's like, oh, but you're doing your own thing, you can do it, you just need some help to get off the ground, you can do it. So there are tons of women out there with this ambition. They just have nowhere to go, because for so long, when you think of women in construction, what comes to mind? Women employees in construction, because the narrative, it's just been one narrative: woman in construction. It's all about getting women into the industry. And we do this by supporting or perpetuating this view that they should be employees. They don't all have to be employees. The narrative needs to be enlarged to increase, to the point where women can also be business owners. So when you think of women in construction, your mind just doesn't automatically think, oh, she must be an employee at so and so. And that's what I found in the industry. For example, in law, I never had this view that I couldn't be have my own firm. It's natural in law, for example, and law is a male-dominated industry too, with a long history, all right, of disparity. But we have reached a point, even in this old profession, where women feel empowered that they can set up and start their own firm. In construction, it has been my experience, and I've worked in other industries too, even in financial services, and it's the same in financial services. You have women who think, oh, I can start my own bank, but my experience is that in construction, you don't necessarily have that. And it's because the narrative has been so dominant for centuries that women are just employees. And it goes back to history, right? When you even look at the role of the unions, even during the world wars and so forth, it has always been to keep women out, right? Women are taking away the jobs from men. That's not the case. Okay, so we have World War, the men are going off. Let's bring the women in to fill it. And then when the men come back, let's pass a law or a policy that says women should not be allowed to work, in the trades or so. That has been the history, right, of the construction here. And so what that does is that it perpetuates the narrative that, okay, so as a woman, you only can come in and find work. And then we have on the other foot, you're an outsider, you're older, you can't get an apprenticeship, and so you're often left at the mercy of the employer. When you go on site, for example, you have a lot of consultants, independents, they're mostly men, right? You'll be hard pressed to find a woman or multiple women on a site who are consultant working for themselves. It's just not the case, and it's because of the narrative. And that's what even in Master Builders is about, trying to change that narrative for women in construction.
I think I know of one sort of startup company that is purely started by a woman, led by women. Each apprentice is a woman, accountant is a woman. It's great, and I love to see that, and I like to see more of that, really. And I think that is a beacon and an inspiration for women coming in from the side, and young women coming up through apprenticeships or graduate schemes, how to get into this. And actually, I can see that company going really far and growing rapidly because of what they're doing. So I really hope some big things from that, and hope to see more of it, really. So you're really sort of empowering women into doing that. And that's quite interesting that in the world of law and the world of finance, you're right, you do see sort of more female-led startups, practices, and in accounting and law. So, and you do see less of that in construction. And I think that's really interesting insight, that actually, if we do
it's a narrative, because because even going to university and stuff like that, you do, one of the things they teach you, starting your law firm. Even here, you're doing, the law society and stuff, they teach you, you just start your law firm, and then the same, you don't, but I mean, when you go to school, to, let's say you follow a purely construction path, like I was speaking to a lady, and she said that she only did a course in contract management, and that was it. Everything else is technical. So you don't really get that opening of the mind that, you can go off, you can do something else. You don't have to follow the crowd.
No, I mean, I think that's quite typical. I mean, look at the subject leadership throughout university, throughout my career. It's always been getting the technical competence, getting, all the analytical side. And then all of a sudden you become a leader or put into a leadership role, and then you haven't got a clue what you're doing and you fall on your face. I think that's quite typical. They don't teach you how to start business. There's a sort of things you've got to go out and learn. So that's really interesting. Some really great insights into that. So what do you hope to achieve? What's your really main aim? What's the biggest target that you're trying to aim for with Master BuildHers?
My mission is to have more women turning over £1 million a year. That's it. And initially I put a number, like I had a maximum number of women or businesses, and I took it off because I don't want to limit myself. I just know that if we need to, right now we're 4.9%. I would say we need to get to at least 10%, at least 10% of the businesses being owned by women. And of those women, like they say, use the 80-20 rule, I would like 80% of them turning over £1 million a year.
And,
it's possible because construction is a high growth industry. There are not many industries that you can go into and turn over £1 million even in a year, even less than a year. You can do that in this industry because this is a high growth industry. Everybody pumps money in this. Even after COVID, you see the government is like, construction is going to get us out of this. It's one of those industries, and the fact that it's out there and we are not taking a chunk of that is a problem.
It's an untapped resource. It's
yes,
a little gap in the market, if you like. Yeah, that's really good. And so, if people wanted to come and talk to you and know more about Master BuildHers, how are you helping empower, and how are you helping people do those startups and take a bigger chunk of that pie? What are Master Builders doing?
So we have a website, which is masterbuildhers.com. We're on Instagram at Master BuildHers, and I'm on LinkedIn as Patricia Haywood. And we also have a page there, but we help I do a lot of one-to-one coaching with women, and also VIP days, and periodically we do small group programs. Last year we had a small group program. And I also, because I'm a lawyer, I know I'm big on corporate social responsibility, because as a lawyer you have to do pro bono hours. So we also have pro bono hours that, help with the community and stuff like that. So that's how I've been working with women. We are for profit, and looking right now, I'm looking for ways to have partnerships in order to find more ways to have that corporate social responsibility aspect to the company, to just spread the message and get more women, really just gung-ho and revved up to know that they can do this, they can do their own thing. So that's what I've been doing. I put out a lot of content, a lot of videos. If you go on the website, there are a lot of things that you can consume. We also have a private podcast for the women, the Master BuildHers. We call them Masters. The aim is eventually to create a community where women can just gather and tap into each other. And because one of the things is that you have to go together. I told you before that Napoleon Hill is one of the people that I look up to. And one of the things that he talks about is the mastermind. And you have to connect with people who are on the same journey as you, because to stay the course is going to require a lot. And that's why a lot of businesses fail. A lot of businesses fail, not just because, they don't have the money or the know-how, but it's just the tenacity of it. Staying the course takes a lot. And if you have a group of girlfriends who are cheering you along, they're going through the same things, and you can bounce ideas off each other, you're going to get there faster. You're going to get to that £1 million a lot faster. And this century and this time, everything is about collaboration and partnerships. That's how you're going to build your business and your brand. The old way of doing things on your own, going alone, is not the way of the future. It's not the business model of the future.
That's fantastic. So yeah, I do recommend to absolutely everybody, to connect to Patricia. The content that you put out there is fantastic. I really do enjoying seeing a lot of that. And you are really a real inspiration to a lot of people. So thank you for everything you do. So unfortunately, we have to bring this podcast to a bit of a wrap.
That's fine.
Unfortunately,
it was so nice talking to you.
But before we do wrap this up, there's a couple of questions I want to ask. Well, actually, the first thing is really is for you to ask me a question, and I'm not going to answer it now. I'll answer it at the beginning of the next podcast. But if you have a leadership question for me that you'd like to ask, then I can answer that next week.
Okay, so in construction, we are big on hierarchy, and on projects, everything is about hierarchy. And I think what I would love for you to discuss in the next episode is what is your view on hierarchy? How do you think it impacts just the way in which, and the culture and the way in which we conduct a business? And what are some of the alternative structures you think that could be utilized in the industry?
That's really interesting. I really like that topic. something I'm really passionate about myself. So I'll enjoy that one.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll add that on to the next podcast. Thank you ever so much for that. So the last thing I'd like to ask you then is what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
I think the most important aspect of leadership is self-awareness, because self-awareness is humbling. Until you reach that point, I call it heightened self-awareness, you think that you know everything when you do not know a thing. You come from a place, it's like when you're a lawyer, for example, you have leading questions and you lead because you already know the answer. That's the answer you want, right? When you have self-awareness, you come from a place of asking open-ended questions because you are willing to hear a different point of view. And we see that all the time in the industry, right? The question, how things are phrased, that this is what the project manager wants, but it boxes us in, and it perpetuates a status quo, and it reinforces that view that this is how we've always done things. It doesn't open your mind up to contemplate alternative solutions. And I think it robs the project and also the industry from just having people say what's on their mind. And, it comes back to when you talk about leadership and, for example, men, how men lead, and why is it that some men don't talk up when they see things happen on site. For example, something happened to a woman or some men, is because the leaders, I believe, lack this level of self-awareness. And so they come from a place of superior authority. That's what happens when you have self-awareness. You come from a point of humbleness, because you're always open to learning new things and receiving, and you know that you don't know everything. So I would say a lot of us lack self-awareness, and it's a journey, and it's an appreciation, and I think it's being open to recognize that you are not always right and that you don't know everything. And that's a struggle for a lot of people in the industry, because we're in an industry where you're supposed to know everything. But that's not life, and that's why so many projects go wrong, because everything is pinned to one person who is supposed to know everything about the project. And so they can't. It's inhuman. You can't be a human being and be like that. So I would say level of self-awareness. All the great leaders that I study and that I look up to, like in my circle, they all have a high level of self-awareness. And one of the things that I've learned is that great leaders are open to learning more. They're open to teaching. They will show you the way. They will not hold anything back from you. And that's because they have when you have a high level of self-awareness, you're not worried about, who's coming to take my shine, or shine is there for everybody. And so you delegate, you don't micromanage, do things like that.
No, I think that's absolutely perfect, and exactly, I agree with you that I think that's brilliant. And it sort of reminds me of a phrase that the more you know, the more you realize the amount of stuff how much you don't know.
You don't know, yes.
And that's so true. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know a lot of things. So that's absolutely brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today and hear about your insights and your perspective on women in construction. I really do think it's going places for yourself, and I really hope that helps inspire and empower women to do more startups and really, improve our industry, bring a fresh perspective, innovation, and hold us men accountable for our actions, and really, helps changes for the better. So, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank
Patricia.
You so much for having me. Thank you.